Ceri Jones.
Hi guys, and welcome to the Christmas podcast, part 1. I say part 1 because I will be putting up part 2 in a couple of days to give you plenty of listening to over Christmas. I put together a selection of all the guests and episodes from this year. And as you can imagine, one every week. There's over 50 episodes. So, to make it more practical, I put it into 2 parts, and part 2 I'll be putting up on Boxing Day, so there's lots to be able to listen to. So sit back and relax, grab a beer or something stronger, and maybe a mince pie, and listen to my summary from 2022. Enjoy. Episode 66, Professional Irish Flight Hire, Jackie Mahan.
I just won't go out, throw something into a pot. I go out, I'll wash it, make sure that grease is off it, and I'll stand there, make sure the colour is right. I think the colours, the Irish colours, there's nothing like it in the whole world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's basically, I just think the colours are just something. It makes a difference to a fly as well, Ceri. A lot of people will be saying to me is, can I have that dressing for that fly? Half the time I can't say to them, listen, I can't give you the dressing because you won't have it.
No.
And they won't have it.
No.
And that's the one thing with a person dyeing his own materials. It's very hard to explain to people that what I have, even what I dye today, is going to be totally different than what Tony O'Sullivan has in Cork.
Yeah.
Because it's to do with the water as well. My water is more boggy here, so I'm going to get a different colour. I'm going to get a different colour than what Tony has, because he'd be more minerals in his water, if you know what I mean, down in Cork.
Yeah.
Where my water's coming from an actual bog, coming down from the Benbulb and down through the bog. So my water quality will be different than Tony's, and that makes a difference with the dyeing as well. Back to your question, Tony's colours, it'd be different than my colours, if you know what I mean, as well.
Yeah.
And, Tony often sends me colours, I often send Tony colours, because the colours are just totally different.
Yeah.
And the work that goes in with a curry is just, but it's worth it. It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it.
I suppose it's meticulous as well. If you want to reproduce a colour, which you had done previously, it's not just a case you got to remember. I guess you got to write everything down, have you? I
have everything written down. I have a book here belonging to my grandfather. I started making my own dyes. There recently, I put a cape, I think, up yesterday of a colour. I want to get more into that. I'm looking to do more of that, to be honest with you, Ceri, for next year. It's just amazing, like the difference between seaweeds, different times of year to go and I think lift that seaweed after a heavy frost or a storm.
Yeah.
There's just different things. Even magenta, like done with blue bottles, boiling blue bottles to get magenta. It's just different things.
Boil blue bottles?
Actually, blue bottles to get magenta.
Well,
getting a load of blue bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to get different colours. Adding even down to roots of some flowers and putting the actual roots in and boiling it. Their colours, yeah. And I definitely want to get more and more into that end of it.
Episode 91, Welsh Rivers expert, Terry Bromwell.
I want to talk to you about now. And this is what brought you some fame now, hasn't it? You're a pin-up guy,
I'm a tough pin-up boy.
Tell me what happened then. Tell me the story with this big fish you had up in the Don, isn't it?
Yeah, the River Don in Scotland in the International. It was my first peg, C3, and I was under a bridge and the weather was boiling and the river was really low and all the ranunculus beds, you could see the weed all through the river.
It's a big river?
Yeah, it's massive.
It's nothing like a...
Oh no, this is a brook compared to the Don. It's wide and it looks like you can wade there, but you get up above your knees and it'll take you off your feet. And for us, the spiders are working well, so we were using them above the French leader. We used them on the French leader, but putting the spiders in the droppers. And in amongst the weed, we had like 20, 25 inches apart from the nymph to a spider, and like shaking the tip through the weed beds, and we were getting measures. So again, the spider to flicker,
All right,
because
yeah.
it was pearl in it, it was flashing, and it seemed to get the fish. And we've done that in practice. We'd done a little bit of it in practice. We were catching fish, so we stopped doing that and find something else. So if we fall back on, and that's what I set up. I set a French leader up with a 3.5 mil on the point, and a size 14 black pearly spider.
There's 2 flies.
Yeah, 2 flies. Yeah, and I was fishing the inside seam first, and I caught 2 fish pretty quickly, and then I come from there then because I didn't want to overfish it just in the second session because it was tough fishing. It wasn't easy, and I left it for a little bit, looked for another fish. It was nothing really going. So I come back, and where the pool would drop in, and you had about 3 foot of water in the end of the pool, there's like a washout, and it was like really thick ranunculus, just thick lines, and there was like little channels, and I seen this one channel, and it just looked like it stopped. So I thought, I'll chuck the bugs in there and just shake a tip. I chucked the bugs in, I turned the rod to the side, I was bringing it through it just a little bit faster than the current, and I was just shaking the tip. But I fished a French leader. I had a 15-metre Daiuku leader, so I was pretty far away, so I weren't disturbing the fish in the weed. And it stopped, but I felt it through the rod. It thump. You know, sometimes you have a salmon and then you feel him on worms or whatever. You thump. It just thudded, and I struck. And as I struck and I draw the line just come towards me slow, just come straight at me. And my controller was behind me. I went, oh no! And he was like, what's the matter? As I was saying, what's the matter? The line went slack in my hand, and the fish was just above my head. Just completely, just water spray everywhere, and this trout was just flicking through the air. And I was like, I went, that's a brownie. And I was expecting a sea trout, because we were catching sea trout up, and some of the boys hooked some big fish we never got to see, and we thought they were big sea trout. And but as it turned in the air and flicked, and the water spray, and it was like slow motion in my head, and I was like, this is a fish. This is insane. So I dropped the rod. And then it just went crazy, and it just, the power.
What leader you had on?
I had the Anak 3.5 fluorocarbon on. Yeah, it was nothing.
I won the dropper as well.
On the dropper, yeah. At that time,
which one did you take?
He took the dropper of the spider, but I didn't know it took the dropper until I got a little bit closer. I was like,
you were the weed bed next to it.
Yeah, there was just thick. It was like a chalk stream, thick, like beds and beds and beds of weed. And he like kind of tail flicked out again. I dropped the rod, and then he went under the weed, and I was like, I'm going to lose this fish. But I thought, right, okay, the best thing I can do is keep the nymphs away from the weed. I shoved the tip of the rod in the water. I had the handle like he was holding a dagger, and I pressed the rod, the tip right into the riverbed, and I bent it down, and I put the line through my little finger, and I thought, he's under the weed, he's safe. He thinks he's safe.
Oh, I see, you wanted him under.
Yeah, so I wanted to keep all the gear right on the riverbed, because the weed is, and because it was like thick weed coming out, it was like rafts. So under there it was clear. So in my head, thinking quickly, I was like, get him clear of it all. So what I started doing, he started to slow up, and I thought, he thinks he's safe under there. He weren't too bothered. So I was inching in him at the time. It felt like it was forever, but it was seconds. So I kept on just pulling the line inch by inch, until I got him out. And I kind of like and as soon as he see me, out he come, whoosh. Jumped again. Jumped 4 times he did. And my controller was like, I can't do anything with it.
Your net is not good, that's it.
Lucky I had my Snowbie net, my big net, and it had got an extendable handle on it. It would have been a nightmare if I didn't have that. Lucky I like a big net because it can quickly. And so I was like, kept on turning him, and then the one time I turned him and he come out from a weed, I seen him flare his gills. Oh, and this fish is knackered. He's stumbling. I was like, I got you. And I was like pulling the line. I turned the rod, he come down the side of the weed on me. As he was turning, I seen him, his gills go again. I thought, right, take him down into the shallow water, so he was on top of the little weed and amongst the stones. And I seen him flounder, and then I turned him, I brought him in, and I managed to like dive forward and scoop him. As soon as I scooped the fish, I looked in the net, and I just looked in, and I just looked up. I went, oh my God! I said, thank you. I did, and
wow.
I picked it up, and it was like in my snowbie net. It was coming out. It was up like this. There's a picture on Facebook of it, the fish, and my net now has got a bend in it.
Oh, I'd keep it like that.
That's what I've left it. It's bent where I held it. Yeah, so I kept him in the water, brought him over, and the head controller was in. He said, it's the biggest trout I've ever seen, he said. And the controller was like, how the hell did you get that? How do you land that fish? I said, I have no idea. And we took the pictures, and I was still in my session, and I was like, right. We measured it. It was too big for the trough, so I got measurements on my rod. So he put the fish in the trough, and it was out about an inch and a half out of the trough. So he used the measurement of the rod, and the controller and another guy verified it, the two of them, took photos, and he said it was 73.3 centimetres.
Wow.
And I was looking at it, I put him in the water, and I spent about 5 minutes with the fish. I was making sure he was all right. I was like, and then he was like, he took a little bit of time, but then I was just standing there, and the head controller come down, and he's like, yeah, he's all right, and he was right beside me, and he just started to kick, and I watched him go out to the pool, around, and he went down river and turned and sat in the pocket, and then you just seen him go away.
Wow.
I took the fly off, and I threw it into the river, and I said, thank you very much. I took the fly off, I caught it on, and I sacrificed it to the fish farm.
Episode 91, owner of Rainbow Valley Trout Farm, and also the man behind Wimbleball Reservoir, Mark Underhill.
You know, fish fitness really is the most important thing, really, for me, for Wimbleball, because I love hearing when, I know it's, a lot of people don't like hearing when people get snapped off or lose all that, but I love hearing that. I know I put a fish in there that's just giving someone a nightmare, you know, and hearing people have gone down to the backing, I hear it a lot. You know, what I hear a lot is, it's the first time I've been down to the backing. It's the first time I've seen the backing. Yeah. You know, I hope my backing's tied on. But a gentleman last year whose backing wasn't tied on, just as soon as the fly line come off the reel, it was gone. So
it's a costly mistake.
Yeah, it's a bit of a nightmare for him. But yeah, I love all those stories.
I hope it was a floating line. At least you could follow it around me.
Yeah, it was found again. It was found again about a week later.
Yeah.
The gentleman said you know, this massive fish took my line, and it ended up being a £2, Wimbleball £2. But they go like rockets. I mean, they've got the depth up there.
Yeah.
Wimbleball is such a hard lake to fish if you're not a bloody good angler. Yeah. I am not a bloody good trout fishing angler. I love my trout fishing, you know, but I can see the difference between an average angler and the top boys. And I never really realised that until I took the lake on, really, and I can see it.
And I think, actually, listen to what you said, probably one of the biggest reasons why they're so fit is they didn't run in water here.
Yeah, without a doubt.
You know, a lot of the lakes, some of the reservoirs even, they're in nets on the lake, which you think is good, same water, but you know, there's no muscle as such in a lot of these fish.
That's right. Yes. You know? I mean, this site here's got 17 million gallons a day. So each pond's got a 10-inch pipe, full bore, 1.5 million gallons a day going through. Yeah. You know, so these fish have got no choice. You know, they're swimming against current all day. But obviously, the better fish go into the elite to become even fitter again. And I'm actually designing a few things now. Hopefully, make it even fitter again. We're going to get them on site within the next couple of months, and hopefully, the fish will be even better for end of the season next season.
Well, there's a question I ask in all my podcasts, which probably is a strange one for you, because you spend most of your time on the farm and running a fishery. There's still one question which I ask everyone, which I'll ask you. Where would you want to be to make your last cast?
That's a good question, isn't it? I haven't got time to wait for me to think about that one. Hopefully I'm going to teach my son to fly fish this year. He should have been fly fishing years ago. He's 20 years old now. He's caught salmon on the spinner and everything when he was a young man, or a young boy, should I say. hasn't really got into fly fishing over the years, but I said to him this year, you're going to learn to fly fish. So I think I'd like this, my last cast like to be with him. If wimbable, down the arm, fishing for the Browns. So that's where I'd like to be. Or maybe the Bahamas.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd prefer the Bahamas.
Yeah, I'm sure he would. Sure he would, yeah.
Episode 73. My early season method and tactics for fishing the buzzer and duck fly. Anyway, cut a long story short, I had 3, and then I had a beautiful cockfish rainbow, which you don't get very often. So that was something nice. They're all around about the 2.5 pound. And it's great to have them on buzzers, you know. And like I said, I had my kettle with me. I was about to make a brew, but then the last fish I had, I just couldn't feel my fingers. So I decided to head home for the warmth, and I'll record it today. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be talking about early season, the buzzer stroke duck fly tactics. There are many methods, many patterns, and certain conditions to fish each method, whether it's the bank or the boat. So I'll run through a few of these methods, which I have found more successful. Now, there's more to buzzers than just the different patterns. And before we go any further, there's one thing you need when you're fishing buzzers, and that's patience. Try not to pull your flies. You know, just keep in touch. That's all you need to do with buzzers. Keep in contact with the flies. Now, when it comes to fishing buzzers on a boat, they're usually in March, this month now, it's going to be cold. You do get the odd day where you might get a bit of warmth from the sun, but the majority of the fly life, which are feeding on the insects, are down deep. So you need to get your flies down. So, if we take it now, you're fishing off a boat, say, because you're fishing deep. What I mean deep, you know, you don't want to be in deep water early season when you're fishing buzzers anyway. Ideally, I'd be looking at, you know, the 15 foot, no deeper than that really, maybe 20 at a push, but more often than not, 10 to 15 foot, that is a great depth to be fishing. If you're fishing a sinking line, if you're fishing slow, as I said, you're fishing quite almost static, you're going to get, you haven't got no control on it. You're going to have to pull your flies in because otherwise the flies are going to get stuck. So floating line usually is the prime line to use when fishing nymphs early season. Now, because you got the control. Now then, now at buzzer time, duck fly time, there are 3 different patterns which I tend to use. Like I said, when you're fishing deep, the flies you need to use are what's called epoxies, or sometimes called as glues. And these tend to sink quite fast. And that's what you want. Because there's no fur or feather on it to slow the time for the flies to sink down. And they cut through the layers quite quick. And usually put on a heavyish hook. And then the other methods then are nymphs, which, you know, the patterns which include seals for any sort of dubbing. They're the sort of the mid-water to upper levels flies you're going to be using. And then you've got your dries, the duck fly patterns, and hoppers. Episode 107, Irish International, Campbell Baird.
I'm Carrickfergus, County Antrim, so probably 10 miles from Belfast.
Is that where you were originally from?
Yeah, that's where I grew up here. Well, I grew up in Belfast, but moved whenever I was 3 years of age.
All right.
So,
we'll chat more about the fishery in a minute, but there's one thing I got to start it off by saying congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Quite a final, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very good. It was a fair final. You know, the fishing was tough, but that's good. The pegs were all very fair for everyone. It wasn't heavily stocked, which is great. It made for a much better match, rather than an out-and-out stocky bass.
Yeah.
So no, we thoroughly enjoyed the fishing. It was testing at times, but sure, that's what fishing's about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, have you been there before to Garmfrud?
Yes, I was in Garnford probably maybe 8 years ago for the Bank International as well as part of the team.
Oh, right, yeah. How did you do then?
And we didn't do very well. I think we were third. Yeah, we didn't do very well.
So you made up for it this time then?
It was different this time.
I was going to, because I was there covering the event for salmon and trout, and I was, I didn't have a chance to speak to you during the day, and in the night I thought, right, we'll have to get together and chat. But we had a few too many creamy ones, and things got out of hand, and I left. And I think you actually one of the late ones. You stayed there with Jamie Miller, I think, for a while.
I'm always the last one. We always. Even if we can't see, we're still the last ones to leave. It's traditional.
Well, you had a good excuse to do it anyway, didn't you?
Yeah. No, it was great. And it's good after the match when you can have a good chat with people and discuss tactics and see who was doing what. And
Episode 86, a man with a river Usk running through his veins, Gareth Lewis.
Well, it's nice of you to bring me here, Gareth, to this spot on the Usk. It's probably, you were saying, is one of your favourite spots, is it?
It is indeed, yeah. So this is just outside Abergavenny. It's the Gwent Anglins Tîm Mawr beat. I suppose the flagship beat of the club, really.
Is it?
Nice and accessible, and really good trout. You can spend your days fishing various methods, but where we are sat now, I'll quite happily sit there, maybe after work or through a day, and I'll be looking over there, the willows, and the fish will rise there.
With one of your cigars?
Possibly with a cigar, yeah, sometimes a beer.
Or do you normally wait until you have a fish before you have a cigar?
I like to, yeah, because I kind of feel like I'm cheating myself if it's a bit of a trophy, so but yeah, if you're out, and you've come up you're up at 6, and the fishing's not really going to kick off this time of year. It's July now, right? So June, sorry. And it's not really going to kick off until, that last hour and a half, 2 hours max before dark. So yeah, wait, we can see there's a pair of dippers there. And you'll often see buzzards and stuff, and, it's the stuff you can see while, you're waiting for the trout to come. How was the start
of the season for you?
Really good. Very cold at the start of the season. Chatting to a friend the other day, Alex, and he was upstream of me, I was downstream, and we were both just stood in those pools that we know well that are going to produce those March browns and early season flies. And we was just stood there for 40 minutes in the water, up to our thighs. We knew they were going to come on, but it just took that 40 minutes, and we were chattering teeth by the end of it. We caught a couple of fish, got out. Though? That was back in March, yeah. Later March, obviously, but we had LDOs coming off early season anyway before the March browns. So the Usk does fish well early season, to be fair. But then within 3, 4, 5 weeks, it just flipped to summer conditions. Really, we haven't had rain now since February, really, proper rain. So she is on her bones a bit, but she's still producing quite well.
Episode 65, YouTuber Lindsay Simpson.
So this Wednesday afternoon, we're out fishing away, and it was really difficult. Usually Ronnie'd be slaying fish, catching fish left, right and centre, and the other boys wouldn't. I'd maybe get one or two. And this day, nobody was catching anything. Anyway, right, I gets one, and the two boats are quite close together. And so I've landed this fish, and I've killed it, knocked it on the head. That's what we used to do. I know it's not very trendy nowadays, but you used to have to kill all your fish when you caught them. So I've caught this fish, and I was cock a hoot. Obviously, we've caught a fish, and it was £1 a corner. £4 was a lot of money back then, So I've held this fish up in my hand like that. Look at that! It's 1-0, boys! And the bloody thing didn't shoot out my fingers right back into the water. And Rory said, "Get it! Get the fish! Get the fish!" So I'm there with my net trying to get and it just sunk. It sunk under the water. And Ronnie said, get back fishing, catch another one. And so we're just slowly fishing away. And didn't the fish just float to the surface again in front of the boat?
Oh.
Yeah.
Jesus.
It was funny.
That was
lucky. So that's how we learned walk style fishing. And I remember getting in the boat with, I can't remember the lady's name, but on the list it was a bloke's name. When I got in the boat, there's a lady sitting at the opposite end of me. I'm saying, "Oh, what's happened?" She goes, "Oh, he's not so well. I'm standing in." I said, "Okay." And this was a Hardy's final. I don't know if you remember the Hardy's.
Yeah.
Used to sponsor a competition. Chris Osborne run it.
Yeah.
So I said, "Okay." I said, "I take it you fish." And she said, "Oh, yeah, fish." And then the hooter's gone. We're off out. I said, "You boat fish, haven't you?" Yeah, I've been in the boat with my husband a couple of times. I said, "Are you happy with the drogue?" "Oh, yeah, absolutely." So I threw my drogue, which was in a little pouch, over to her. I said, "Right, get the drogue sorted out." And I'm motoring, getting the drift ready. And said, "Right, throw the drogue in." All I hear is spladoosh, not like a drogue should sound when it's getting thrown at the back of a boat. I looked round, there's no drogue. I said, "Where's the drogue?" She said, "You told me to throw it in. You've got to attach it to the boat." She went, "Well, you didn't say that." I was like, "For God's sake." And I spent the next 20 minutes driving round the fleet looking for my teammates saying, "Has anyone got a spare drogue?"
No.
Yeah. It couldn't have been. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just didn't know."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, why did you think you were throwing a pouch into the water? For God's sake, woman."
Episode 69, Ladies International. Julie McGeever.
Of the Archbishop and the drunken gilly.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing was, I'd never been out fishing. I'd never been on the lakes. And I mean, I was busy getting started with, at the hotel and running a hotel. And then one night he said to me after dinner, he, very quiet man over dinner, and he said, "I think it'd be a very good idea, Julie, if you came out on the lake to know what your guests are doing." So Julie took off the next day and went into a renowned angling shop in Ballina and got fitted for new big PVC waders, and I must have got a rod and all that as well. So off we went, and he used to employ for the whole month, over the weeks he was there, two particularly well-known gillies. They were brothers. Yeah. But there was one thing that they were well-known for also. They were seldom sober. And, it's something you don't ever happen now, but it was, 30-odd years ago, yeah. But I always think that whoever was in the best part of sobriety on the day went out with the good bishop on the day. So we went out anyway, and I'd say probably after the first or second cast, the fly came straight back and caught me in the knee. I also remember the knee of the waders. And the gilly spent his afternoon on his knees in front of me trying to take out the fly out of my waders. And I can actually still remember the fumes of that stale alcohol space. But the bishop is sitting up there in the bow of the boat with a curly pipe, and he used to wear a tweed cap, the Irish tweed caps always on him. But he always had the collar underneath his jacket, believe it or not, and he giggling away.
Episode 72, Welsh International and Eglwys Nynydd Chairman, Jeff Thomas.
There was an original pond here, down in the southern end of the lake then. There was an original pond there. And it was, I think at the time there was another works where Borgwana was. It was known as the Carbide Works. And there was a pond there. And that really was where the sort of natural side of how they decided to put the reservoir here, and then taking all the stone from Canelli quarries and bringing it down here to create the dam.
So that was built in 63, or was it started fishing in 63?
It was opened up in 63. And so the fishing started, I think, around about 1970, something like that, Ceri.
Because I remember, if you look back in all the magazines, like it had a big reputation for browns, didn't it, in the early days?
In the early days, well, there were people camping out down here in the early days for March the 1st, for opening day. And they were coming from Northampton, everywhere, just for opening day down here because of the big browns that were, notorious for egg-like fish in those days.
And there's not so many browns there, no?
Very, very few.
Yeah. I suppose it was a case of, at the start of the season, well, not the start of the season, start of a new water, there's lots of food in there, and the fish, just the first few seasons, they're going to grow like any eagle, I suppose.
Well, you could see that one up there now. It's in the cage, the old £9 something it was.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's £9, yeah?
Yeah, £9 odd it was.
Is there a date on it? It did look.
There is something on it. We'll
60s, 70s?
Yeah. Well, the guy who caught it is still on the committee.
Is he?
And yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he's still on the committee now.
It's nice to have something like that on display right now.
It's not looking
I actually caught my very first brown ever. Well, in fact, I caught my first rainbow as well on my first day fishing on egg lice. But I remember catching it in this corner here where not far where we stopped. Corner of the Bogwana. Is there a name for that corner?
The bay that we call that, really. Yeah. They call it the Shingle Bay now, but it's always been known as the bay.
There was a big wind that day.
Yeah.
I remember floating line and just managed to get a line out. I was drifting around Wickham's Fancy, or wingless Wickham's, and it was like, I was converted then.
Yeah.
Have you got any good fish?
That's where I had my first brown of deer. It was in that bay.
Is it?
Same thing with the muddler.
Episode 85, Corrib at Mayfly time this year.
And I just went to the top of the drift, spun the boat around, set my drift, and it wasn't long before the clouds came over and they just looked apart. You know, one of those days where everything just comes together. A lot of the time when we're out fishing, it's too bright. If only there's a bit of cloud, or if only there's a bit more wind, or I wish the wind would drop even. But, you know, you couldn't make a better day. And I had a feeling inside me that this was going to be a good day. And it was. I start the drift, short line in. I wouldn't have even thought I was casting 15 yards. Just lift and cast. And what I found when you're fishing dries, you don't leave the dries for a long time on the water, because 9 times out of 10, my experience, the fish will always come in the first few seconds. Well, the first 10-15 seconds or so at least, you know. And if they don't come then, lift off, false cast and out again. Keep casting, keep moving, because you want to be landing those flies on fish and they come up and take. And it's always the case. Always be ready when those flies land, because that's the time when those fish are going to take. It wasn't long, probably about 20 minutes or so. I was going down the drift, casting, lift, cast again. And all of a sudden there was a splash, a splashy take, you know. I lifted, and yes, I thought, I'm in. And it was a fish, played hard, played round the boat, went under the boat. And for his size, he fought really, really good. And eventually netted the fish, and I'd estimate it a good solid 2.5 pound. Took some photographs. Really golden trout it was, you know. Typical of what you'd expect in a sandy bay. So, after taking a photograph, quick film of him being released, and off he went. Made up. And that settles you then, doesn't it? It's nothing worse than fishing. You can't settle unless you've had a trout in the boat. So then I knew I was doing the right thing. And the funny thing was, even though I had the 2 dries on, they're exactly the same. The size 12s they are, detached bodies. It was the point fly it took. So anyway, I carried on the drift, and then nothing for a while, for about, I don't know, half hour or so. And now I'm drifting across the open water. It's a big bay, and you're drifting over yellow water into dark water, and yellow water and dark water. And then, but there wasn't a lot of fly around. So anyway, I kept on drifting. Next thing, a tiny dimple. Lift, same again. Acrobatic this time. Leapt and just around the boat, and eventually, after a hard battle, stayed down deep, came to the net, and again, another 2.5 pounder.
Episode 111, The Faces Behind Clywedog, Russ and Gaz.
Charge on the second day.
Quite a trophy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big trophy, yeah.
Champions League,
yeah. Cost a fortune in champagne to fill up.
You stay there long.
He still hasn't, though.
Yeah.
So that was in the spring.
Yeah.
And then the other major competition was the Sierra Pace.
Brennigan, yeah.
That's the next one we went to,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
it? Yeah.
End of August, went to Brennig, yeah.
So we have chucked that one away a few times now.
Have you?
Like you mentioned, that big brownie in Rutland, and
Yeah.
yeah, so it was about time we won that one.
So the final is a different place every year, is it?
2 years it does in 1 year.
Moves around every couple of
Every
years.
couple of years, yeah.
Tends to, anyway.
Oh, so this was Brennig this year?
Brennig this year,
It was, yeah.
And you just chose to pick to fish with these because you fish a lot of pairs competitions together.
Yeah,
don't you?
no, we've fished together in pairs now for 3 years, I think, haven't we? Something like that.
Yeah, 3 or 4
We
years.
had 2 seconds and
disaster.
Yeah.
I've seen a few times where I've seen video clips on Facebook of both of you fishing on a boat, and one of them was you were chatting to a little yacht coming alongside.
Yeah. Those sort of. It seems to happen at Grafham. That does. It's always Grafham. we seem to have a little bit of.
That was close.
Misunderstanding with yachts.
You can see his 5 o'clock shadow. As
Yeah. The thing is, we were. That was in the Sarah Pairs
final, yeah.
And we hadn't done
was it?
particularly well, but we thought we could still make the prizes. So we got our limit, but we had to get back in. Well, the quickest way is A to B, isn't it? There's no deviation. You're going in a straight line from A to B. So we're going from A to B to get into the jetty as quick as we could. But obviously there was a yacht doing the same line. So we were moving, and he wasn't moving, and there was a few words exchanged, and I remember.
Yeah, you asked him the road, didn't you?
Yeah.
Politely.
He wasn't for moving, but fun and games.
I don't know these issues and seem to find us, don't it?
Yeah.
I think adrenaline as well, isn't it, in a competition?
Yeah.
You just need to get to these places.
And,
we were laughing. I hope he had the funny side of it because we did. Yeah. I was on my phone. I was videoing it as we were going along. Yeah, I was laughing.
Episode 93, Irish Bass Specialist, Jason O'Riordan.
That is funny. It's actually started with sea trout.
Oh, yeah?
There's a small river in the town here called the Colligan. It used to be, back in the day, I suppose before my time, it was a really prolific sea trout river. I mean, a lot of guys from Wales used to fish it.
Right.
Every summer we used to meet guys who'd come across from Wales to fish it. There was some good size sea trout taken from it,
Yeah.
Nighttime fishing. So my brothers fished. My dad fished. He tied flies. He was a pretty good fly dresser. And it's funny, actually. I remember I learned to fly cast at night. So when I started fishing for brown trout in the day, because there's no real brown trout in that river, it was small things. It was all mad because I could actually see where the trees were, So what we used to do is you'd pull off an amount of line and you'd cast across some piece of fast water near where you were going to fish. And you basically counted the amount of retrieves. So it was, 10 or 12 or whatever. And then when you went fishing, you pulled off the same amount of line and you knew then that you were casting across the far bank because on a really dark night you can't see. And I mean, it was probably the same. I expect you've done some sea trout fishing where you're from. They were pretty strict, about torches, all sorts of stuff. And we used to have some great fun. In my father's time, he told me guys used to walk from the local factory at lunch hour, put their rod against the tree where they were going to fish, go back to work, and they'd arrive back maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock that night, rod still standing against the tree. That was their spot.
Really? Making them mark?
Imagine doing that now. Your rod wouldn't last long on a river, I'd say.
It wouldn't.
That's what they used to do back, and certain anglers had certain pools, he said, and you daren't go into a guy's pool, like he'd pretty much chase you off and say, hey, you can't fish here.
It's like the Germans with the deck chairs.
The old timers had their pools and they were able to rest the pools and nobody was to fish it before they came. And obviously my time, it wasn't quite like that, but lads would arrive out maybe, an hour before dark and they'd sit under a tree and that's where they were fishing and you had to go to the next spot if you'd like. and you could go and fish the fast water. I remember one night I got in because I was fairly young. They used to let me walk from home. I'd walk out, fished, and once I was back about 12:30, 1 o'clock, I was okay.
Yeah.
So was particular night it wasn't that dark, and there was an old timer that'd been fishing the river a long time, and he said, "You're too early, young man." So I went up into some fast streamy water, and I had a fly. It was some sort of an American streamer pattern I'd seen in a book. I don't know if they called a hornberg or something. It had like a teal wing with yellow stripes down the side and a hackle in the front. It was an unusual looking thing at the time. I went up and I was pulling this thing. Basically, it was like a streamer across the current, and the fish were just hammering it. Every cast, I was hitting a fish. So I had about 10 or 12 fish. I knew this fella comes around the corner, and he said, "What are you getting them on?" And I said, "I call it the too early fly."
Episode 77, a Welshman with one of the largest collection of Victorian salmon flies in the country, Richard Iron, Lacher Jones.
Anglers that are tiers, they'll tie a dozen of one pattern. You'd rather, like some of these flies I've seen that you tie, you'd say there's a couple of hours you take to tie them. Just the one.
Yeah, with the salmon flies, I tend to take on average 4 hours for each one. There's a saying that you tie a trout fly, but you build a salmon fly. So there's each component, and you work from the back of the hook forward to the throat, and then the winging process. You're looking at something like a jock scot. It's got something like 30 separate component parts on it. So, it's
you wouldn't
not
do one of those in one sitting. You can tie and leave it.
Some people do, and some people may tie 3 or 4 in a sitting, but I like to sort of do elements, and then I might go away for 2 days and not come back to the vice, or I might finish it up to the throat, and then I'll take a day to think about how I want to construct the wing, because there's so many methods that you can apply to a wing.
Did you learn it from like books yourself, or was you taught a lot of the stuff?
So I looked at a lot of stuff online, and I was on quite a few forums and what have you, but the one person that I can credit to investing a huge amount of time into my tying was a guy called Mark Harrison. Mark used to write hundreds of words in one email. He would curse me for every bump in the floss and every little element. He'd pull me up on, "No, that's not good enough. You need to do this. This is how you do it. You need to go back and try this and make it better." So
was it feel deflated then? You thought you got something good, and then you would rip it apart.
Yeah, you do need
push. You
get a lot of people. I'm a part of a forum, and we're trying to encourage new people come, but it can be quite daunting to start with, because there's people posting flies up who think that this is the standard they need, and sometimes they hear the feedback that they don't want to hear. But I think that you do need that honesty if you want to strive to be the best at what you can, what you're capable of, rather than, someone put a fly up and going, "Oh, that's a great fly," and "Oh, that's excellent, the best I've ever seen," when, clearly it's not. So, if you want to post something just to get the positive feedback, then you're kind of deceiving yourself, really.
Episode 103, the story of the record salmon. In Georgina Ballantyne's own words, Speed kept a tight line, and the fish were still hers. Slowly they were towed downriver to a point opposite the cottage. They saw Mrs. Ballantyne on the riverbank, lantern in hand, peering into what was now a pitch-black night. He shouted to her what was happening, and followed the fish, hoping for even a glimpse of it. But not once did it surface. There was nothing but the great silent weight and the line slicing through the black water. 100 yards below the cottage, there's Capeth Bridge. The bridge has 2 pilings, and as the boat hugged the left bank of the river, the quarry made a determined rush for the far shore. Inevitably, the line would be broken. With waning strength, Miss B applied as great a strain as she dared, and slowly the fish turned, slipping between the pilings, with James Ballantyne, now rowing frantically, could just follow. She was ready to drop from exhaustion, but her father refused to touch the rod. This was a challenge only she could answer. It was nearly 2 hours since the salmon had been hooked in the boat pool. Now they were half a mile downstream. Once more, keeping a tight line, Miss B reeled in, and felt with aching arms that the creature she had not yet seen was almost ready to be taken. It was moving slowly, in short bursts. Gently, she urged it closer to the boat, until they could see that the line entered the water almost vertically. Somewhere, 3 or 4 or 5 feet down, was her fish. Certainly it was ready to be gaffed, but gaffing even a normal-sized fish in the dark is not easy. How were they to manage this leviathan? James inched his way aft, set the gaff against the line, and slowly moved it down until he felt a knot on the leader. Had he not made it himself? Did he not know precisely how many blood knots he had made in the expensive silkwork gut? He ran the head of the gaff down into the water, counting each time he felt a tiny protuberance. 3, 4, 5. The fish must be just below. He pushed forward gently and turned the gaff and drew it up quickly. There was no mistake. With his great strong hands, he brought his daughter's catch to the surface, and with one big heave, he dragged it over the gunwales. The fish, even after more than 2 hours, was by no means exhausted, and leapt and flapped in the bottom of the boat. Father thought he was going to jump into the river, and threw himself on top of it. Miss B sipped her tea, eyes sparkling. 64, my Corrib. I was trolling, in the day, and I hooked and lost a good fish. Yeah, so I had no luck, so I went in to get some lunch. And on this particular day, I didn't have any fry-up stuff on my kettle or anything, so I just had, I think it was just a Mars bar, and I had a flask, mate. I pulled my boat up into an area. It's quite it's the bay itself on the island is quite shallow, but if you go round the corner, it sort of deepens off. So what I did, I just moored the boat, just pushed the boat up on this slightly steeper area, and so instead of actually getting out onto the shore, then I just wedged the boat up a little bit, and I just sat on the bow, had my coffee, which I had in the flask, and a Mars bar, and I was sitting there just eating my Mars bar. Next thing, right in front of me, probably 10 foot from the engine, I saw a rise. So I watched. I saw another rise, and all of a sudden, I can see there's a little bit of breeze going from left to right. And I just watched, and this is something which I never do. If I'm trolling, I'll never have a fly rod. I'm either trolling or I'm fly fishing. But this particular day, I had my fly rod not set up, just in the bag, in the bow of the boat, just behind me. And on my waistcoat, not only fly gear even, just a waistcoat, where I had a floating line, and there's a couple of flies. And I watched now, and it was like a flotilla of mayfly coming off. And they were all close distance, all along. I was looking at the shore. All these fish were on about 10 yards out, maybe closer in. And I was fumbling now, you can imagine. Because these hatches sometimes are freak incidences. They don't happen very often. And I was watching these fish coming up, taking these fly. And then I thought, right, so I was fumbling now, excited. I actually stepped out of the boat then, not to make too much noise. And then I put the fly rod up. And then I walked up the shore then, about, I don't know, 30 yards, 40 yards. And the idea was me to cover these fish walking back towards the boat. And it was just one of those right place, right time. And I covered the fish and nothing happened. Then I cast out again. There was a little dimple. Bang! Into this fish. And he was 7.5 pound. And he was unreal. On the shore. And it was just... And in fact, I've got a photograph which I put up in the... which you'll see to go with this podcast. And it was beautiful. It was so good. And I actually kept this one for the smoker. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wanted to give some to a good friend of mine as well. Episode 105. A Yorkshireman with a passion for fishing Ireland, Melvin Wood. One of the reasons I had to speak to you actually was the photograph you put up last month of that amazing looking brown, and you said he was the second biggest you've had. And where was that?
Yes. That was at Malham Tarn. It's about an hour away from me. It's right up in the Yorkshire Dales, a place called Malham. It's a well-known walking area. It's on the Pennine Way.
Yeah.
And Malham Tarn's about 150 acres, and it sits on a plateau of limestone.
Oh.
Yeah.
It was rich in fly life then.
It's very, very rich in fly life. Very, very rich. And the fish grow extremely quickly. It was one of those days. I mean, it was a test day to make sure our systems worked. And it was the third day of a 3-day testing. And I was lucky enough to be fishing with Rob Denson. I don't know if you know Rob Denson.
No.
He writes in Trout and Salmon. Writes in Trout and Salmon every week, every month.
All right.
Yeah. And I was fishing with Rob. And we're both traditional lock style men. So we were fishing traditional lock style flies. And it was just a case of throwing them out, a couple of quick pulls, splashing the top dropper to get the fish's attention, and bang, they were there. Mind you, they hadn't been fished for 4 years, so there was some expectation of having a good day. But I had 7 fish, and I think Rob had about 12. And, none of those fish were under £2.
Really? You don't get many waters like that. What did you take?
It took a muddler. It took a muddler dabbler on the second pull, the splash, and then thing were on. Yeah.
Wow.
Big fish. Led me a merry dance.
It was very yellow as well, very, very bright fish as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, there's 2 particular strains in there. There's these yellow belly things, and there's ones that are quite silvery. And they both, get to good size.
Episode 76, Dennis Williams.
He persuaded me then to come on this trip to Blagdon. So as I said, we fished there on the boat, came up to gone 5:30, and I hooked this fish, and it was a 6-pound brownie. And I had this brand new rod which I bought, a 10-footer, from the chap who at the time was the president of Ospreys, Sandy Palmer. And he was lived in Caerphilly. He was a bit disabled, but he made fiberglass rods. And a lot of the Ospreys had them, 10-foot fiberglass, which was a good rod for reservoir fishing. So I'd bought this rod, and in the rush then to get back to the weigh-in, I got off the boat. Cardinal sin pointed the rod forward instead of backwards, pointed the rod forward, and in running to get to the weigh-in, run into a tree with my rod and snapped it on the very first time.
Oh, no.
But as it happened, Sandy Palmer got to know about this and gave me another rod.
Did he?
Yeah. So I had 2 for the price of 1, or 1.5.
How did you do in the competition?
So the competition then, I went to the competition, and of course, 6-pound brownie, I won it.
Oh.
Because that was my very first competition, and I won it purely.
I bet it was on an
the
info buzzer
fish.
as well, was it?
Oh yes, it would have been, yeah.
Episode 81, Monaghan Angler with a passion for Loch Sheelin and Loch Corrib, Peter Boyle.
Competition on it back a good number of years ago. and I was partnered with this guy, and I had a green peter on the tail, and I had a bibio on the top dropper, and I was bringing the flies in through. Just you're talking about stories, and I was bringing the fly in through the waves, and next thing this lovely son come up and he took the bibio on. I knew he wasn't that well hooked, you know, and I played him, and I kind of played him a wee bit harder than I should have. And just as the son had come to the boat, he started jumping. And so he started jumping, and stuck the net in, and I says, I'll get him into the net. And he just went bananas. He went aerial, and next thing he jumped up in front of me, and I could see the fly going one way and the trout going the other way. And that was it. The trout was gone. And I says, here, I wouldn't even like to say what I said.
Yeah.
your man in the front of the boat, then he started telling me how I should have done it, you know. And I said, listen, not to worry, it's done, he's gone. And I said, well, get out and get another one. As I pulled the net in here, the fish had swam into the net. I swear to God, it must have been when the trout jumped and he hit the water, he must have went to swim underneath the boat looking for shelter. And when he swam underneath the boat, he swam into the net. And you're talking about the racket I had with that guy in the boat. He was telling me that I wasn't allowed to weigh it in.
Wow.
You can't weigh it in. And I says, here, you just watch me weighing it in. Imagine, you know. What's the chances of that ever happening?
Make that up, could you?
No, but I'll tell you now. I'll tell you about the one that happened. It happened to me.
Episode 79, a story of a hidden lake in the South Wales valleys and a rusty bucket. I just sat there, put my bag to one side with the Kelly kettle, ready for when I get back. Now I was going to walk round the lake, and off I set. It was plain to see quite early on that the banks are really hard going, very clumpy, very boggy and overgrown. So the easiest thing for me to do was to wade in. So I quietly waded into the shore. The wind was blowing behind me, out into the lake. It was the far side that appealed to me, on the left-hand bank. There was mistiness in the air, and it was damping. I remember damping like a misty rain. The conditions weren't too bad, but what a beautiful looking place. It looked haunting, and around the banks of the left-hand side were the start of hawthorn bushes just starting to flower. Didn't make a cast. Slowly inch my way around the side, waiting to see if I could see anything. And I saw a little dimple way down, so I walked slowly and slowly. Now I found when you fish in these small lakes, you can say, with wild fish, I try not to cast blind. It always pays to look for fish, spot fish, and then fish for them. Because by casting blind and walking the bank casting blind, you're going to spook them. So I just kept walking and walking. And then I thought, right, I was probably coming to around 50, 60 yards from where I thought I saw this fish rise. As I was walking down, I could see the fish rose again. Only a tiny little dimple. So I know there's at least one fish in the lake. Would it have been from the initial stocking from Tommy's bucket? Anyway, I pulled some line off. I'm probably about 30 yards away now. The fish was rising just on the edge of the reeds. The misty rain was getting quite heavy now, and the mist lowering, covering the mountain on the far side. So I pulled some line off. Cast about 15 yards. I wait, pulled some more line off. Crept ever so slowly. Cast about 25 yards. Bang on to where I saw the fish rise. With the rain coming down, which helped to dry. Sometimes when your fish dries, they could be too high in the water. With the rain, it was just dampening the fly, and it was in the film. I waited and watched, and all of a sudden a little dimple came up. I lifted and I was in. To my amazement, as soon as I struck, the fish took line. It just took and run, and I was shaking them. I didn't expect for 1 minute there's going to be anything that would take line, let alone anything in this lake. Headed for the reeds. But I managed to turn him, and after about, 3-4 minutes battle, slid over my waiting net. I had the biggest smile on my face, I gotta say. I walk out to the bank then, laid the fish on a nice mossy bit of bank, took a quick picture before released her to see her swimming off. It was a great experience, I gotta say, to think that fish probably come from the generation of initial stock with Tommy Ayworth and his dad all those years ago. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as I did putting it together. And as it's Christmas, I have prizes for my patrons. from guests who have supported the podcast from the start and have kindly donated the prizes. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them. Irish Professional Tyre, Jimmy Terrell, Sam Funning from Neath and Dillis Angling Association, Wyn Jones for his leatherwork, Peter Cockwell and Craig Barr from Flash Attack Flies. So if you're not already a patron and want to enter for the chance of winning the prizes and get access to over 100 episodes plus exclusive content, sign up by clicking patreon.com/Casting with Ceri Jones or visit my website castingwithcerijones.com. Well, have a great Christmas, and as always, don't strike too soon.